Labor, the LNP, and the real estate lobby are claiming that a rent freeze could hurt renters. Here's why they're wrong. Rents in Brisbane are out of control, so the Greens are calling for Brisbane City Council to introduce a 2-year freeze on rent increases. But according to certain people who profit from rising rents and house prices, rent freezes are bad because they'll decrease the supply of rental homes, and the only way to make housing cheaper is to support private developers to build more homes. That's what the real estate agent lobby has been telling us for years. Let's break that down. There are 2 parts to their argument against rent freezes. Firstly, rent freezes will make it unprofitable for existing landlords to rent out their homes, and they'll sell up, thus reducing the supply of rentals. This claim is very easily rebutted, because if a landlord does sell up, the 2 most likely outcomes are that their house or apartment will be bought by another landlord who'll continue to rent it out, in which case there's no reduction in the overall number of rentals. Or it'll be bought by someone who's currently renting, in which case that's one less tenant competing for other rental properties and no net reduction in the overall supply of housing. In short, when a landlord decides to stop being a landlord and sells their investment property, the property doesn't magically disappear. If a landlord sells up, that's a good thing because it puts downward pressure on rents and property prices. And I should add that the Greens are also proposing a crackdown on Airbnb investment properties and a vacancy levy on empty homes. So under our plan, investors wouldn't want to leave homes empty or convert them to short-term rentals either. Labor and the LNP's second attack on rent freezes is that they'll discourage investment in the construction of new housing. What do they mean by this? Well, private developers want to make money, but freezing rent increases will also put downward pressure on property prices, which I think is a good thing for renters and anyone who's trying to buy a home. According to the major parties, developers need to be confident that they'll be able to sell or rent their new houses for high enough prices. If predicted revenue from future rents and sales isn't high enough, it won't be profitable for developers to continue building. Now really, that's just an argument against capitalism in general. But let's imagine for a second that they're right. What Labor and the LNP are telling us is that if rents couldn't rise or started falling, then developers would stop building. But they're also simultaneously telling us that the only way out of the housing crisis is to keep building more and more dwellings, that we just have to increase the supply of homes and eventually prices will fall. Do you see the contradiction here? It's tricky. You might have missed it. They're claiming that rent freezes are bad because developers will stop building if rents are too low. But they're also claiming that the only way to make rents fall is for developers to keep building even if rents stop rising. Now, both of those things can't be true. They're imagining that at some point in the future, we build so many more homes that it starts to put downward pressure on rents, but that developers will keep building even once rents start falling. Now, those 2 arguments are contradicting each other. And in fact, both of them are wrong. The reality is that if a rent freeze did cause some investors to move their money into other sectors, that would put downward pressure on land values. Land values would drop. If land values drop, then other developers, owner builders, or even government public housing projects could afford to buy developable sites more cheaply, thus reducing the cost of building new housing. And remember, our proposed vacancy levy would also discourage speculators from leaving development sites empty long term. Scaremongering that a rent freeze might reduce the supply of rental homes is pure propaganda. It's a myth spread by real estate agents and property speculators. They understand perfectly well that freezing rent increases would make it harder for them to rip off tenants. So don't fall for the spin. The whole point of a rent freeze is to stop rents rising. If we want to stop landlords ripping off tenants, let's stop them putting up the rent.